Okay, I'm in Ephesians chapter 4. I'm going to spend a little bit more time in verse 14, talking about the warning that Paul gives for us to pay attention to. All right, so let's turn to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14, where it says that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. All right, that there are people who plot to be deceitful. This is their craft, and they are doing so in order to trick other people to their advantage, of course. All right. So in the previous message, I was speaking about the importance of understanding what other people believe, because it does help you to be more effective in communicating the truth of the gospel, those things that God has revealed to you as being true. The more you understand another person and what they believe that is different from what you believe, the easier it can be to communicate what you believe to that person and perhaps encourage them to take a different point of view, the one that you're presenting. So the more familiar you are with what other people believe, then the easier it can be to do this. But just remember that every person has to be considered as an individual, and even though they may identify with some specific religious group of some kind, it doesn't automatically mean that they believe every doctrine that is presented in that organization that they might be a member of. All right, so it's important to keep that in mind. Now, with regards to yourself, right, you've got your ability to relate to others. With regards to yourself, it gives you an opportunity to review the things that you do believe, because you may, on occasion, find something that you believe that just simply is not true. And that will be clear when you are evaluating it in comparison with other different beliefs, other doctrines. You may find something that is valid, or you may find something that gives you more information that shows that your point of view is not valid and that you need to continue to discover more things with hope that the Lord may reveal to you what really is true concerning that matter. So it's not just for others, but it's also for yourself, and that these are really important things to keep in mind. All right, now in this message, I'd like to spend some time talking about the people who are speaking things that are not true. All right, and when considering the fact that there are people who are speaking things that are not true, we have to consider two different possibilities. There is the possibility that they are not doing so in a deceitful way. They're not trying to be deceitful. They really do believe what they are communicating, what they are expressing, what they are testifying of. They really do believe it, even though it's completely wrong. People can be very sincere and also be sincerely wrong. And so we have to account for that. That's a different group of people, and I don't think that's who Paul was referring to in this passage. But you have to consider that there are not, even though a person may be communicating things that are not true from God's point of view, that doesn't mean that they are doing so intentionally. But then there is the second group of people who definitely are being deceitful, who are intentionally dishonest. All right, so let's start with the first group of people. The first group of people, like I said, they may very well be very sincere in what they're doing. They might be very sincere, and they might really want to believe, or they might really believe what it is that they are sharing with others. Okay, I have known lots of people that I would be very confident in saying that they are very sincere about what they really believe, and that they communicate these things to other people with conviction that this is true, even though I don't think it is. But they're doing so with good intent. They genuinely want to help other people, and they want to help themselves as well, but they're looking out for the interests of others. All right, now if you consider, for example, the broadcasting that I do on radio through Living God Ministries, if you haven't noticed, some of these stations, they have a large variety of people on these stations. Some stations have a variety of people, but they kind of teach the same kind of theme, most of them. But there are some others that have a big variety, of different belief systems, and they don't agree with each other at all. So there is a variety. If you listen to a station that I'm broadcasting on, you'll hear me for 25 minutes or so, but then other people are there throughout the day, and you will hear differences of beliefs and of opinions between the different speakers who are using radio in order to testify of what they really believe. With what I present, it's a little bit more noticeable, that what I present is different from the others. The others, there are some similarities. On occasion, they may disagree with each other, but in general, they don't disagree too much. With the exception of some stations. It just depends on what the owner of the station or the manager of the station has decided to have in the lineup, in the schedule. But when you consider that that there are many different organizations who are, in a sense, working together in order to support a radio station so that it has enough of a variety of content to broadcast throughout the day. It's not the same person, same message all the time. So people, won't get bored or overwhelmed by a certain point of view. When you consider that this is necessary in order to allow for someone like myself to broadcast, you can be a little bit more kind to the people who are broadcasting on there, even though they may be saying a lot of things that you don't have any confidence is true at all. And so, this is important, to keep in mind that there is a variety, that there are differences. And, I myself, I've listened to my own program on occasion when I'm driving around in the car and the program is on the air at a certain time. I'll listen to the program, and I'll tell you, there have been many occasions when I have listened to the program and I just couldn't help but think, my goodness, I can't believe that this is really being broadcasted on Christian radio. Listening to myself, I think that I can't believe that they're actually allowing this to be broadcasted on Christian radio. And I suspect that some of you probably have had occasions like that as well. If you've listened to me a lot, where you've thought, my goodness, did he really say that? Is that what he said? And they're allowing it to go over the air, in the midst of all these other ministries that are saying something completely different. And sure enough, yeah, that's permitted. There have been a few occasions when I have been challenged, by some of the other ministers and pastors who are on the station, on other programs, and other people in the community, and the owners and managers and we have conversations about that, and we talk about that, and they've always gone well. I've always been able to hold my ground just fine. And there are many managers and radio station owners who have really grown to appreciate the work that I do. They see the effect of it, and some of them will even broadcast the program for free on some stations on occasion. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes they do that just because they know what this message does, how it affects people. It is true, and people get set free, and they get to know their God, and they grow in the faith. They mature as believers. I've been doing this for a long time, and so I got a long history of contributing to the lives of a lot of people. But this is a way of understanding the differences, and you need to consider that that there are people who are very sincere about what they are doing, about what they believe. They are genuinely wanting to help other people. It's just that what they are teaching is simply not true at all, and that's just a struggle that everyone has to go through at one point or another. All right, now you'll find, of course, that the message that I'm presenting is not as common as other points of view, and I'll tell you why that is. It's not complicated at all. All right, the reason why there are so few opportunities to hear about the grace of God, the forgiveness of sins, the inheritance in Christ, what it means to live by faith, it's very difficult to find good quality teaching. And the reason why is simple. It's not really supported. Okay? I mean, people just don't donate to work like this so much. It just doesn't happen. I'll tell you that I'm producing these videos and I upload them to the radio station. Living God Ministries does not provide any funding for this work that I do on video at all. There are a few people who do send me something every month, and I'm very thankful for that. It does mean a lot, and it really does make a difference, and it makes it possible for me to do what I'm doing. But it definitely is not enough for the amount of time that I do in preparation, in production, and in the resulting correspondence that unfolds after these video messages get uploaded and people start looking at them. And so, if people were willing to support work like this to the extent where I wasn't supporting it, or half of it by myself, in that sense, because I've got to use my own free time, which I don't have a lot of, in order to make up the difference for where donations fall short. And I do it because I believe in this. I see the effect of this. I'm willing to give of my life too. I give more than what other people give. All right, I give more than what other people give out of my time and my efforts. But I'm very thankful what people give. It means a lot, and I appreciate it, and it's definitely used. And there have been several occasions when I've asked people to help me do this work, so I don't have to go and do other work somewhere else in order to pay for my expenses. I have a home, I have children that I take care of. I do it all by myself. There's a lot going on, that I have to maintain, and it's not just a matter of going month to month. If I do that, eventually it's going to be a catastrophe. I've got to be able to plan ahead. But as I've asked many times, and eventually I just stopped asking. I just did, because nobody was responding really. Like I said, a few people here and there, and I appreciate that. But in general, I just got tired of asking because people just ignore me. They forget it. And as I have had conversations with people, several have told me, look, Aaron, I just cannot believe that out of 500 views or 1,000 people viewing, that you're just not getting enough funding for this. I just can't believe that. And all I can say is, well, okay, you can't believe it. Thank you for letting me know. That's what you want to believe. That's just fine. It's not true, but that's the attitude that a lot of people have. They just can't believe it. They assume that somebody else is going to do it, and of course everybody assumes that somebody else does it, which means nobody does. And so it's very hard for this kind of teaching to be presented, because there just isn't a lot of funding available, and the funding is necessary in order to do the work. Otherwise, we got to go do something else in order to survive. We just have to. There are some people who are retired. They have, they have funding from their retirement or whatever, and I don't think I'll ever experience that. So it's not going to come from my end. And they can't, they can do what they can do. They do what they can do, and that's about it. But it's not the same as what you see with these other organizations. These other organizations are enormous, they're 10 times the size of the work that I'm doing, 10 times, 20 times the size of budget that I have to work with. But where is that funding coming from? It's mainly coming from extortion and bribery. Okay, that's really where it comes from. It comes from extortion, which means you had better give money to the work of God, or God is going to hurt you. All right, and of course they don't say it that way, but that's effectively what they mean. That's the message that gets conveyed. Give your money to this organization, or God is going to interfere in your life in some way such that you are, you're going to feel like you're being cursed. And then there's bribes, and the bribe is, if you will, then God will bless you. He'll bless you in return. You'll be compensated adequately for the donations that you make. And it turns out that there is an enormous amount of funding available for bribery and extortion. When it comes to radio ministries, also, there is a relationship between radio ministries and churches. There is a relationship between the two. That there are a lot of churches that have enough donations that they provide an outreach or evangelism budget. They have a certain amount of money that's set aside for reaching out to other people, and they send this money in to the radio ministries that are teaching things that are compatible with what they teach of the church. So they become a donor to that ministry. When people contact that ministry, ask for a local congregation or a local church, then of course they are the referral. All right, this happens a lot. And the work that I do and that other people do that's similar to what I'm doing, that doesn't exist. We just can't do that. And so it has a lot to do with funding. All right, now regardless of how much funding is available, the Lord is doing just fine. I really do believe that if anyone really wants to know him, that they will have an opportunity to know him in some way. But I still think it's really, really important for us to find ways to contribute a portion of our lives to the work of God. And this is, what I do. This is something that I do. All right, now then you've got the other category of people, and those people are the ones who are intentionally dishonest. All right, that there are people who intentionally are dishonest. Now, of those who are dishonest, I'll divide them up into two groups. You've got the first group, I'll talk about them. They're pretty easy to refer to, and that's those who are intentionally wanting to do harm to other people. And then you have another group who are dishonest, and they know it, okay, but they're not necessarily wanting to do harm, but that they are trying to do a greater good, okay? And I'll explain that after I talk about the first group. All right, that there are people who are intentionally dishonest. They intentionally present doctrines and teachings, okay, deceitful plotting. They do this intentionally, either to cause harm or because they want, in the end, to see a greater good come out of what they're doing. All right, so then now the first group of people, those who are intentionally trying to cause harm to other people, I have seen people like this that, to me, it could not be any more obvious that this is who they are. They are just present. They are there in people's lives for the purpose of taking advantage of them and finding some way to live off of their labor. That's what they're about. Labor naturally produces pain, and people in general would like to avoid pain. And so in order to do that, people will devise schemes or plot or come up with different ways that they can live off of the labor of somebody else. All right. And there is an opportunity for people in religion to do this. There is a huge opportunity through extortion, bribery, or other means that people will speak to others, and they will present themselves in the lives of others because they are intentionally wanting to deceive them so that those people will give them a portion of what they earn so that they don't have to work as hard as they would have to otherwise. Okay? That's just the way it is. I've seen lots of people like this. I think that if you get out enough, you'll find that there are people like this as well. They are just looking for a job, an easier one, and they're intentionally being dishonest. They don't believe anything they're talking about necessarily, or maybe most of it, but not all of it. And they're intentionally being dishonest because that's how they make a living. And there are people who will support that because those people will tell those people, right? The people who are teaching will tell the people who are the members of the group whatever they want to hear. All right? And so that is a real thing. That's a real problem. There are others who are intentionally dishonest and deceptive because they're simply total control freaks. I mean, that's the simple way to say it. They just really live to control other people. They want other people to do what they say, to say what they say. They really want to have total control over other people's lives. There are pastors who I have encountered who have the sincere belief that if anyone walks through their doors, that this pastor has total and absolute authority over every aspect of this person's life. Now, of course, he doesn't exercise that unless you threaten his tithing base in some way. But when you do, he'll be in your life, and in your life in a big way as the authority in your life. I mean, people who've got attitudes like that, they are dangerous. I mean, that's a simple way to say it. They're very dangerous people that will prevent others from knowing the Lord and will even turn people away from the Lord because of the offense and the violation that is being done to other people. Okay, so you've got the monetary aspect, you've got the control aspect. There was one guy that he was an executive for some big company, and he was either laid off or fired. I could never find out exactly what it was. And he decided that he was going to start a church, And what kind of a model did he choose? He chose, I'll tell you, he was a cult leader. Okay, I mean, that's what he did. He organized everything that he was doing according to the model of a cult, okay, which was to assert absolute authority over everybody's life. And this would, deviate even beyond what would be considered to be biblical or scriptural. I mean, this guy really did focus on being a cult leader in the name of Christianity and presented as some kind of a messianic, we're going to be kind of partial Jewish added into that. It was quite interesting to watch. I watched him for many years, I think like 12, 13 years. I watched him start, watched him continue to grow, watched him build his church building, and got his congregation, saw some of his videos, and there were even people in Israel who were contacting me, and I was having conversations with them about some of the things this guy was doing that were very offensive, very offensive and disrespectful. And that's what you got, and because there were people who wanted someone to follow, who enjoyed having a cult leader in their lives, there are people who have personalities like that do well with cult leaders, that he's got a congregation, he's got a donation base, he's got funding, he can do his thing. Now, I haven't checked in the last 5 or 10 years, so I don't know what he's doing lately, but that's what I mean. He was even on radio for a short while. I remember that for about a year or so. So there are people who are intentionally dishonest, wanting to cause harm to other people in a way that they will personally benefit from other people's suffering, all right, suffering, and from the deception, and from living in a lie, and all these false hopes and false promises, and that's just the way things are. You have to be aware of that. Okay, now the next group of people that I think you should be aware of are those who are intentionally dishonest, but they are doing so because they want something good to come from it. All right. Now, there are a lot of unique examples that I could refer to, but the one that is without question the most popular is the issue of forgiveness. Okay, this tends to be the most popular and the most common example of someone who is being intentionally dishonest. All right, some kind of pastor who's being dishonest with his congregation, where he will not tell them that God does not hold their sins against them anymore. He won't tell them that. Instead, he reminds them every week in some way with some small phrase that God holds their sins against them, and he knows better. All right, I have encountered pastors who know better, They do. I've talked with them, behind the scenes, privately, and then they will agree that the sin issue between us and God came to an end. All right. But they won't tell anybody that because they are afraid that people are going to use that truth inappropriately. And well, there are some people who do. I personally think that they would go out and indulge their flesh anyway. I don't think it really is contributing. I don't think it's really making it easier for anyone that they would do it anyway. But still, that's what they're worried about. They're worried that, well, if God doesn't hold a person's sins against them anymore, then the person can just go out and sin like the devil without any concern of consequence from God. All right. And there are people who will take that belief and they will run with it and they will indulge their flesh in whatever way they desire, believing that God is not going to intervene and cause any punishment to be upon them because of their sin. All right. And then what happens? They destroy themselves. So that's generally what happens. Okay. People just destroy themselves. And then they contact me later and they say, Aaron, yes, sure enough, I was one of those. I took, the people contact me and they say, I took what you were saying about complete forgiveness and I used it as an excuse to indulge my flesh. I destroyed myself. And so now I understand, now I know better, and I'm not going back to that ever again. Okay. I think this is good. If they got stuck in it and they never repented, then that's not good. But there are people who do that. And I personally have the opinion that if they didn't hear that from me, they would have been doing it anyway. Okay. So, I don't think there's any real loss going on. But there is a big concern that people will use the truth inappropriately. I know one pastor, very, very popular in the world, and he used to teach forgiveness as I teach it. But then there was a change. And from what I can tell, this was it. It was the fact that he was concerned that people would misuse what he was saying. They would misuse that and they would go out and just indulge their flesh. Now, surprisingly, also, when he made that change, there was a lot of funding available for him. A lot of donors came into his life and supported his work, and he was able to build this massive international organization. But he knows better. I know he knows better. I've seen what he has written and what he has spoken about before, and that he teaches the exact opposite later when it comes to the subject of forgiveness. And so I have every degree of confidence that he is being intentionally deceptive, intentionally dishonest, and his whole ministry has been built on this dishonesty because he's worried that people will use the truth of God inappropriately. And he has justified this by thinking that, well, I kind of get them in the right direction, and then maybe they'll see it and figure it out on their own. I'm sure that's the kind of conversation that he has with himself on occasion. All right, well, what is the default if that's what they teach? Well, the default is the law. All right, some form of law, some standard of good and evil, some set of principles for daily life, some kind of standard that is going to be defined in the context of the law, which of course will have some attachment of punishment, consequence. God won't bless you. He won't give you rewards. There'll be something related to that. And it's just the same thing as living by the Mosaic law. It's the same thing. It's just, it's maybe what I would call Levitical light. It may not be the whole thing, but it's part of it. And it will still have the same effect. The effect of the law is to stir up sin. Okay? It may not be the sin that you would engage in if you didn't have the law, but it's going to be other sins. There's all kinds of new sin that gets manifested within a person. It's just religious pride, just in and of itself. Religious people can be some of the meanest people you ever run across in your life because of the massive amount of pride that they build up because they don't sin like you do. It's just something as simple as that. But there's a lot to say about how the law stirs up sin. I've spoken about this in other places. I'm not going to try to duplicate that here. But that this is the default and what eventually happens. So while people are dishonest because they're wanting a greater good, well, they create more evil, in the end. There's a little bit of a delay, because the law has to have an effect on a person's life and stir that sin up, but it will do that, so there's a little bit of a delay, and that gives the appearance that it's okay, that it's all right. But no, in the end, all right, later on, you've got to have a sense of vision. You got to have a sense of the long term, not just some short term, this is the Sunday morning kind of experience, but what about a person's whole life? What about our lives? What about the next generation of people? And the one after that? All right, and people just don't want to think that far ahead. When it comes to trying to deceive people, all right, intentionally being dishonest for a greater good, that's only going to be delayed it's only going to delay the inevitable, which is going to be a greater evil. All right. But that's the issue. Okay. That's the issue that takes place. Those are the dynamics that go on. So you've got people who are intentionally dishonest because they are intentionally wanting to take advantage of and cause effectively harm to other people, or they are doing so with good intentions, and it ends up creating a worse situation possibly than there was before. All right. So I'm going to pause here. In the next message, I'm going to talk about verse 14 from the point of view of the Apostle Paul at this time. What were the teachings that he had to deal with? What were some of the deceptions and dishonesty and some of the problems that he was facing? I'll talk about that in the next message. That would be specific to what he might have been encountering when he wrote verse 14. All right, for those of you who are using this for your small groups, I got a question that you can use to facilitate some conversation. Have you encountered people who were intentionally dishonest? All right, have you encountered somebody who you could tell was intentionally being dishonest? Okay, and in addition to that, someone else who may be proclaiming something that they hoped was true. Have you ever encountered somebody who was preaching, so profoundly and so aggressively, and you could just tell that it was as if they were hoping that it was true? Okay, this can at least get a conversation started. All right, and I'll continue into what Paul was likely thinking of when he wrote this in the next message. Thanks.